Hello everybody, Teacher Ian here. We'll look now at two words, assume and infer. While both words involve filling in gaps of information, the difference lies in evidence. To infer is to use logic based on facts that you have. To assume is to take something for granted without any proof at all. With inference, we can call it the detective approach. An inference is an educated guess based on observations or premises. You're looking at data A and data B to arrive at conclusion C. So the process is fact plus reasoning is equal to inference. An example, you see your co-worker arrive at the office soaking wet and carrying an umbrella, and you infer that it is raining outside. A nuance might be that inferences can be strong or weak depending on the evidence, but they always start with a piece of information. Since infer is about acting like a detective and drawing a conclusion based on evidence, the sentences usually highlight a clue followed by a deduction. Let's look at some example sentences, and these are categorized by their context. So with daily observations, these sentences show someone reading between the lines of a situation. From his silence, I inferred that he didn't agree with my proposal. Next, she saw the empty cake box on the counter and inferred that her roommate had finished the dessert. Next, the audience could infer the character's tragic past through the subtle hints in the dialogue. Next, we'll look at a professional and technical context. And in these cases, infer is used to describe data analysis or logical reasoning. We can infer a trend of rising energy costs by looking at the utility bills from the last 5 years. The software is designed to infer user preferences based on their browsing history. Next one. Based on the ASHRAE Level 1 walkthrough, the auditor inferred that the HVAC system was poorly maintained. In academic and scientific use, in research, infer describes reaching a conclusion that isn't explicitly stated. For example, historians infer much about ancient daily life from the pottery shards found at the site. Scientists infer the composition of distant planets by analyzing the light they reflect. In the reading comprehension test, students were asked to infer the author's primary motivation. So the infer process. So to use the word correctly, there should always be a because of X, I conclude Y structure, even if it's hidden. So let's look at evidence. The ground is wet. And the inference, you infer it rained recently. The evidence, the light is off in the office. You infer that the manager has gone home. The evidence, the engine is making a clicking sound. You infer that the battery might be low. common mistake comes with infer versus imply. Remember, the speaker implies and the listener infers. It's incorrect to say the speaker inferred that the project was over, because the speaker implied it. A correct statement would be, I inferred from the speaker's tone that the project was over. When it comes to assume, we can call an assumption the leap of faith. An assumption is a belief accepted as true without any supporting evidence. It often happens before you even look at the facts. So the process is a belief plus 0 equals assumption. An example, you see a co-worker is late for a meeting and you assume they are lazy, even though you have no idea why they are delayed. A nuance is that assumptions are often hidden in our thinking. We use them to simplify the world, but they are much more likely to be wrong than inferences. When you use assume, you are essentially treating a maybe as a definitely, because it lacks evidence. It often appears in sentences involving risks, social misunderstandings, or hypothetical logic. Let's look at some example sentences, again categorized by how the word is used. In daily life and misunderstandings, assume often highlights a lack of communication. I assumed you were bringing the keys, so I didn't grab mine. Next, don't just assume she's angry. She might just be tired. He assumes everyone knows how to use the new software, but most of us are struggling. In professional and technical contexts, in work settings, assume is often used to define the starting point of a project or calculation. So, for the sake of this energy audit, we will assume the building is occupied 40 hours a week. Next example, never assume a wire is dead. Always test it with a meter first. Next, the budget assumes a 5% increase in material costs next year. In idioms and common expressions, we have assume the worst. So when he didn't call back immediately, she began to assume the worst. Or assume responsibility. The manager was quick to assume responsibility for the team's error. And assume a persona. The actor had to assume a different accent for the role. So the impact of assume in a sentence. If you say, I infer you're busy, you are implying, I see your 50 unread emails and 10 missed calls. Or if you say, I assume you're busy, I haven't heard from you, so I'm guessing you have a lot to do. The equation of logic. A helpful way to remember the relationship between assume and infer is fact plus assumption equals inference. If you have a fact, the man is lying in the gutter, and you add an assumption, only bums lie in gutters, you reach an inference, that man is a bum. If you change the assumption, so people in gutters are usually sick, you reach a different inference. That man needs medical help. Let's look at some key differences at a glance. We'll look at the feature, the inference, and then compare it to the assumption. So with source, inference is based on external evidence or facts, and assumption is based on internal beliefs or suppositions. With logic, inference follows a trail of reasoning. Assumption leaps over the need for reasoning. With reliability, inference is generally more reliable, and assumption has a high risk of being incorrect. With timing, inference usually happens after seeing data, and assumption often happens before seeing data. A quick note on imply versus infer. So, as we said, people often confuse infer with imply. Imply, the sender of the message drops a hint. The boss's tone implied I was in trouble. With infer, the receiver of the message picks up the hint. I inferred from the boss's tone that I was in trouble. To finish off, a quick grammar tip, looking at assume versus presume. While often used interchangeably, there is a tiny difference in the level of the guess. To assume is based on nothing. It's a blind leap. Whereas presume is based on probability. I presume the doctor is in her office because her car is parked out front. That's all for now. Thanks so much. See you in the next one. And like and subscribe to help our channel grow. Thank you. Bye.